we do it in a more low-key setting in a room with tables, but because of Facebook Live, this has the best audio. So that's why it looks a little more formal than a work session usually is. So just so you all know, let's go ahead and just dive right in, right? Okay. The first thing on the agenda is the new schools survey. Superintendent Rogers.
Test 1, 2. There we go. Is that better? Okay. So we're not on a time crunch with naming the junior high and the high school because those are out a little bit. But with the elementary school, really, it's they're at the point now where the elementaries, and I can tell you that Steve West will be here. Ian is here, our operations director, and Mike, who's the construction manager. And it would really help the architects if, when we put out a bid, we knew the school colors and mascot and the name, because they incorporate that into their design and their plans, that kind of stuff, as opposed to referring to it as the new elementary school in Grantsville. And so they've requested that we give them some direction, at least on that. You have received, prior to this board meeting, an email from me that had suggestions that were solicited here at the district office from district leadership. And then Marie sent out, I thought, a very good survey. And we didn't crunch numbers for you because it's really not a how many votes can this name get or this name get. It's clearly in the realm of the board's decision. But we wanted to give you some ideas. And so our teachers and parapros and our parents and our students all contributed. And I think you have, gosh, we had well over 600 responses, right? And so we've got that information for you. If you need to have any of that emailed to you again, I think we didn't put my email to you on the board packet. Is it on there?
Well, the survey responses.
Right. So I sent, if you'll remember, a couple weeks ago, I sent you, here are some ideas, and then we thought it would be good to also send a survey out. So if you can pull up that email, if not, I can forward it to you again. But if you look in your history of emails from me, you'll see one that just has some suggestions that came from here at the district office and SES members and that kind of a thing. So what we would like is for you to be able to have some discussions. I'll resend that when I sit down so you can see that email. It didn't have a lot of different, I mean, it included a lot of the suggestions that you got online. So my recommendation to you is to have some discussion and sharing and give everybody on the board an opportunity to kind of weigh in. And then really our experience has been, you know, if each one of you would put 2 or 3 of your favorites down and then collect those, get them to Jackie. She can see what kind of common interest there is if you want to go that way. And then you can vote on those final 3 if, you know, depending on how. I will tell you that we had provided some names, possibility for names, and I think Scott will attest to this, to the last board when we named Old Mill. Of course, Sterling was, there was a Harris and there was an East, and we didn't want it to be Harris or East, but we wanted to honor, one of them was just named East, one of them was named Sterling Harris, so I think the board decided and made a good decision, hey, we'll call it Sterling, that way it is a different name, but it also still honors the name of that individual, Superintendent Sterling Harris. With Old Mill, we were thinking Mill Pond, and we came to a meeting and there was a discussion, and I think one of the board members, Matt Lawrence at the time, said, I don't like that, it sounds like, you know, like the mud ducks, you know, at a mill pond. And someone said, well, we want to honor the area, it's the grist mill area, how about Old Mill? And it just kind of rang true to everybody, and so it really doesn't, It can be as long as a process as you want, or as short as a process as you want.
Because that took 5 minutes.
That was about 5 minutes. So you've had the opportunity to get feedback from staff, students, teachers, and in no particular order or weighted factor. And so we would just turn the time over to you, and we will honor and make the best of whatever direction you give us on the name for the school. I do have Grantsville Area Director here, Mark Ernst, who was in a meeting today with MHTN. They had an architectural meeting on the new school, the elementary. So it's exciting that we're going to get up and moving, and pretty soon get the bid packages out and get started, right, Mike?
Yeah, about 3 weeks we'll be ready.
About 3 weeks. So you can appreciate that we really could use a name for that. On the other ones, you certainly could give us direction on that tonight. You would need to move that as an action item, or we could forward those discussions to the March 9th meeting. So I'll stand for any questions and sit down at this point, and I'll look for that email and forward you again those ideas that we came up with as a leadership team. Madam Chair, what else would you like? Any question for me?
Does anyone, my suggestion for this is look over these suggestions, maybe let's ask them. I've asked a few people from Grantsville, hey, what do you think about this name? If anyone else has, and let's ask questions for the next 4 or 5 minutes, and then let's write, I think Jackie gave us these note cards. Let's just write our top 3 names that we like or discuss or on a note card, and then compile those 3 and have a top 3. Does that sound like it would?
I think you'll be surprised at the common denominators that you
So,
find.
Just an observation, just general, maybe just a guiding principle that historically we've done. I mean, just kind of level set that. I mean, it's, and not that we're bound by tradition, I suppose, but typically, and there are a few exceptions. I mean, you don't have to look very far, but generally, with the elementary schools, we've typically tried to give some kind of association that would be known locally. Settlement Canyon's close to Settlement Canyon. It's kind of a
landmark kind of.
But typically known in the community is kind of the guiding principle, right? It's like, okay,
Yeah.
Middle Canyon is close to Middle Canyon. Is there a Copper Canyon around here?
Yeah,
Or was it just refer to the copper mines?
Yeah, that kind of east side thing.
Yeah.
And so my observation is just generally that with those, we haven't really used the landmarks. And then I think my other observation is that, and more globally, because we've only named one high school really since I've been around, but is when it comes to high schools, if you look at the box score, a Saturday morning newspaper, look at the football games or something, my observation has been that usually there's some kind of geographic feature that most people in the state would know. It seems like, when I look up and I look, if your kids are going to play baseball in Snow Canyon, you're going down to St. George. I might not be able to point it on the map, but I could tell you Snow Canyon's in the St. George area. I don't know I know where Timpanogos High School is, but I don't know. I couldn't put it on a map, but I know it's going to be down around, in Utah County. Just kind of those general guiding principles. It seems like that.
That's correct.
For others from outside of our community, typically you try to name it after something that most of the states can
You have 2
be able to
schools
say.
that were named, and I'm not sure I'm sure Clark Johnson started with that name. That's named after an individual that contributed much, and also Sterling Harris is. But I think those are the only 2. Oh, and Anna Smith. Okay.
Yeah.
I
But those are pretty much exceptions. And in fact,
Right.
I think we actually now have a policy on naming stuff
And
on individuals.
For individuals who, and the reality is, you don't have to worry about a proprietary trademark name, because if you wanted a Lone Peak High School, you could have Lone Peak for the Tooele District. Of course, it gets statewide a little bit confusing,
Well, and I think
but
that's
there
my
are several
point.
schools that, like, there's a Stansbury Elementary, and it's in Granite District, and there's Stansbury Park Elementary.
Right, back
and
to
and
the-
we learned with Old Mill, there's another school that is named Old Mill, and I can't remember what district it's in. Park City, but it also has owls as the mascot. So I wouldn't worry as much about at least at the elementary level, duplicating that.
They're not playing
or-
football on Friday nights.
Right.
Let's focus on the elementary initially and then kind of look at time. Valerie, did you have a comment? Your mic is on.
Yeah, so you said maybe we write down like our top 3, and then does it go back out to the community to choose from those 3?
No, we're just making a decision.
Gotcha. Okay, and then,
Give direction. And we can make a decision tonight.
We would like you to make a decision, at least on the elementary tonight, so we can move forward. You could do the others, but it's usually, it's really, you want to avoid the how many people like that popularity cut, that it can create problems. So really, you take the advice or the suggestions from the community, and then you guys make a decision on
Okay.
those.
so then also, I just wondered if somebody could explain to me the 20 wells. I assume there's something behind that, but I don't know what. Yeah, Bob?
Well, all I know is I did ask a few Grantsville people, and originally, that area that this school is being built in was called 20 Wells.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah, the other historical name suggestion you got came in late, but there wasn't really a deadline, but it was Marshall, because apparently the rail station right there, or that area was referred to as the Marshall area of Grantsville. And so those two are more historic than they are landmark oriented, right? But unless you're really up on the Grantsville lore, which I wasn't, but I will tell you, Dolene knew absolutely what 20 Well, but I think her family was part of the pioneer group, you know. Right, Dole?
I asked Alan.
Can
but he
you
let me
can you
down,
say anything about 20 Wells, Dolene?
I asked if he was a historian.
Dolene, can you give us a little more history on 20 Wells?
That was what the first settlement was called before the community decided to change it to Grantsville.
Okay.
Okay.
So that, Valerie, it was referred to as the 20 Wells area. And
Okay, and then, sorry, I will be done after this one. And then the Blue Rock one, is that kind of a commonly known thing or no? Okay.
there's a
Anyone-
Black Rock, I understand. Is the one out,
Well, the rock right on I-80.
but I've never heard of Blue Rock.
Heard of Blue Rock, so.
Alan or,
Now,
oh, Jolene said me neither.
Bob was teaching at Tooele High when the pioneers came through, right, Bob?
Oh my
Really?
goodness. Alan, you live in Grantsville. Have you heard there been any suggestions on your end?
You know, not really, to be honest. I mean, I guess I have never been involved in a school naming process. Maybe I was involved in the old mill.
No, because didn't you take
Maybe it was before my time.
Yeah, you were.
Lawrence's place, did you?
No.
Karen did.
No, yeah. So, I had thought that we sent out a survey that said here are 4 choices or whatever, and tried to see what the numbers were. And so, I mean, it's not a big deal one way or the other, but I have not. Well, I just was gonna say I haven't heard strong feelings, but I also haven't done a lot of like informal survey work. Personally, since superintendent mentioned 20 Wells, I've kind of loved the idea and loved the name, and I think it's unique. And Marshall came in late. I mean, it's not anybody's fault, but our mayor is Marshall, and that's immediately where my mind went. But not that there'd be anything wrong with naming it.
Probably accept that
Yeah, I'd be every bit as uncomfortable with the Moritz Elementary. So,
Where is that on the list?
yeah, I tried to get my family to propose it, but I guess they passed.
Oh, I
but-
did.
So, as I'm just basing this off of 1, 2, 3, 4 nods, 5 nods. On this naming of the school, does everyone have 3 names, or are they leaning towards 1?
I have 3 names.
Okay.
I'll even throw out my 3 names, and it's just because as I looked at this, I just was thinking I kind of was agreeing with some of what Scott said, you know, some of it was about geographic area.
Yeah.
And of course, you know, this elementary school is being built in the shadow of Deseret Peak, and so I thought, well, that may be an appropriate name for that. And then, of course, the old Lincoln Highway, which a lot of people come to view and see the Lincoln Highway, but I'll be honest with you, I'm kind of like with Alan. I kind of like the name of 20 Wells. I think that might be my top pick. So.
The other one that I don't think was on there, but was on our list was Pony Express, since it's fairly close.
Oh.
People come out here for Pony Express, kind of,
Not overthink this. We did the other one in 5 minutes.
I think we
We're
can.
already double.
So do you want all of our 3, or do you want a motion?
This is actually the fun part of doing a new elementary. The rest of the work starts.
It's not an action item,
It's
but
not
I
an
could make a
action
motion
item,
to
but
make
she
it an
could
action.
make a motion to make it an action item.
Can I ask, we're trying to do name, mascot, and colors?
Uh-huh.
For at least the elementary.
For the elementary.
Yeah.
That's our focus tonight.
That's our
There's some other
priority.
things on the agenda that are, I think, really important to get to that dive in. And I would prefer to, if we're diving in on schools, let's just focus on the one elementary tonight.
Well, if there are
Okay,
strong feelings against 20 Wells,
Speak up.
yeah, speak now or
Forever hold your peace.
forever hold your peace.
So I'm not against 20 Wells. I think it's cool, but I also really like Deseret Peak, probably mostly because I feel like there's going to be more people who know what Deseret Peak is versus the 20 Wells might sound a little more random, but I'm not so set on it that if everybody else wanted 20 Wells, I would be fine with that too.
Just one thing to consider as you, the reason why, I mean, we need to move forward with the elementary name, but not the high school name. But if you wanted to reserve Deseret Peak for a junior high or a high school name, if that was a consideration, you probably wouldn't want to double up with the elementary.
Right.
If that makes sense. You know what I mean? If you're leaning towards that at the high school level, because that was a real common recommendation on the high school.
You don't want it, especially where they're not, they were next door to each other maybe, but.
You know.
So is that what we are supposed to make a motion?
Somebody can.
Well, we need to make a motion to move the item to an action item first.
Madam Chairman, I move
Yes,
that
Bob.
I move that we make the item of naming the school to an action item.
I'll second.
It's been moved by Bob, seconded by Camille to move the naming of Grantsville Elementary to an action item.
Not Grantsville Elementary, the elementary in
The
Grantsville.
elementary in Grantsville to an action
Already
item.
is. Elementary, yes.
Is there any discussion to the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes.
I do want to recognize, I probably should put this in there. I do want to recognize the patrons that were so good about submitting surveys. We had a 2-week period, the last 2 weeks, Monday through Friday of the 2 weeks. And we got, like I said, over 600, ideas. Some of them were serious. A few of them were very funny, like Home Depot High. And, so appreciate the sense of humor, but we did get some really good ideas and different options.
Sounds like.
Okay, so it's been moved to an action item. Does somebody want to make a recommendation to name it?
Madam Chairman, I move that we name the new school in Grantsville 20 Wells Elementary. Thank you, so 20 Wells Elementary.
I'll second.
It's been moved by Bob, seconded by Alan to name the new elementary in Grantsville 20 Wells Elementary. Is there any discussion to the motion?
Just a clarification, our understanding, and we may want to check, but our understanding that the correct, at the time, it was 2 letters, it wasn't hyphenated, it was 2 words, 20 wells, not 1 word and not hyphenated, and that's how we understand.
Yeah, capital T to capital W. the only discussion I want to just touch on is, yes, it's not as well known, but what a cool opportunity to learn more about Grantsville. I think it's so cool to find out the history of our county, because there's a lot of people that have lived here for a long time, but a lot of us have not lived here for a long time, and it is really cool. So, okay, that was the discussion. Any more discussion to the motion? Okay, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Superintendent Rogers, the new elementary school is 20 Wells.
Thank you. Now, as you look at the next two lists, we have colors and a mascot. Now, I will tell you, our elementary colors don't seem to be a point of contention as much as high school colors do, because of obvious reasons, sports and, participation. And you wouldn't want to wear a red shirt if you lived in Tooele, and you wouldn't want to wear purple if you lived in Stansbury, that kind of a thing. But we don't have that at the elementary, so the colors, we're all over the board at different schools with all different kind of colors, and we have some repetition. There's no real, just uniqueness, and it really is not as vital. And then we have mascots all over the board. As you know, we've got Willow Wolves and Grantsville Grizzlies, and we've got meerkats. I've never seen a meerkat in Tooele County, but we've got Middle Canyon meerkats. And for the elementary kids, it's usually more of a fun, childlike, not really cartoonish, but not as fierce, as a stallion or a cowboy or a
20 Wells
buffalo.
Tigers.
So there was suggestions around the area. Is everything from you can see that list. So if, really, you can look at that list and kind of there's
Alan's already decided.
so.
Well, no. Grantsvilleites, be clear that I'm not making all the decisions here. The only thing I was going to say is the common theme is alliteration and animals, and that's why 20 Wells Tigers made sense to me. But because you got
That's-
Grantsville Grizzlies, Willow Wolves, 20 Wells Tigers.
The 20 Wells Sea Turtles.
20 Wells Turtles. But I went to a college where the mascot was a sage hen, and I have to say, when you get to some of these animals, it can be a little bit hurtful to your self-esteem. So I just want to be careful. The tortoises, yeah. We might have some copyrighted issues there, but
Miners was another suggestion. That the alliteration
Oh, when
partial miners was kind of
20 Wells Miners. Yeah, that wouldn't work as well. The 20 Wells Thunderbolt. I'm just going off some of these.
I saw because I was looking for T's.
I like the tiger too.
Can I make a motion?
Make a motion.
Do we need, actually, maybe a clarifying question first? Because we moved just the name of the elementary to an action item, do we also need to make a motion to move the mascot and the colors? Or does it all consider?
Do that in one, Phil,
In just one motion?
right? Do that in one
Okay.
motion. We should, yeah.
So I motion that we move the mascot and colors to an action item for our meeting tonight for the elementary in Grantsville, for 20 Wells Elementary. Ooh.
I'll second.
It's been moved by Camille, seconded by Valerie to move the mascot and the colors of 20 Wells Elementary to an action item. Any discussion to that motion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes.
the other key name, Alan, was Trailblazers.
Yeah,
Oh,
and I'd be fine with that too.
I make a motion that we do the mascot for 20 Wells Elementary's Tigers.
I'll second
To which?
Tigers. I like the 20 Wells Tigers. I think it's a great idea.
we've got a motion by Camille and a second by, can two people second it?
No.
Oh, okay. Alan handed it off to Bob, seconded by Bob, to name 20 Wells, the mascot, as the 20 Wells Tigers. Is there any discussion to that motion? Okay, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes 20 well Tigers.
Great.
Remind them about
Not-
copyrights.
Not that
Not
tiger.
Tony the Tiger.
How about orange and black with that?
I mean,
We-
it makes sense, but it's also a little Halloweeny. I don't know.
I just think of now that Tony the tiger. All right.
Okay, let's get to colors, you guys. Let's get to colors.
There's really no, I can't give you.
Can somebody tell me what, just Alan is the Grantsville expert, what are Grantsvilles and what is Willows? Just trying to get a variety
That's
of
us.
Willow is red and Grantsville is blue. Blue and yellow.
Willow is just red.
white, probably.
Red, white, and black.
They followed
They
the
do a lot of black
school
too.
color,
Oh,
the high school.
I was gonna say to make it easier for parents, let's do it red and black.
But I think you want some distinction between
Yeah.
them.
Yeah.
That's why I asked, just simply. So
I
you
didn't
said it's
realize
blue
they
and,
It's probably more critical at the high school level if you're looking at, having a different.
I just think of elementary kids. I've got elementary kids and they have Spirit Day. So, it's sometimes,
what about green and gold? Is one of the suggestions. I'm trying to find a combination that's not,
yeah,
How are you
something
gonna
that,
make a tiger green and gold?
that's not my problem.
Yeah, I thought might be Tooele.
This is true.
Green and yellow. It's a golden green.
This is where I'm.
You could do red and green and have it
Green
Christmas.
and black. Green seems fine. I mean, I don't know. I just
What about green and black?
green
Boom,
and
done.
black.
I like it. Works for me. Are you making a motion?
Yes,
Mark-
I move that we.
Oh.
Oh wait, just kidding.
No, Mark just made a comment. I feel like this is like, I thought you were going to say something. Okay.
My thought was just, I was trying to think of like sports teams that, like the Missouri Tigers are yellow and black. I was trying to think of
Yeah.
Tigers at what color they are.
Yeah.
That's where your gold could come in.
Okay. No, I just want to,
We could go
yeah.
down.
It's pretty easy to.
What was
to
that
have
comment?
Whatever tiger model with a
Tigers are orange and white.
Orange, yeah, and white.
orange and blue and white.
Well, they got the blue involved, yeah.
Clemson Tigers have a throw purple in there. But
Green and black is actually
They're
on the
orange
list.
and white mostly.
Yeah, I saw it on there. I just was thinking something that's not already out in Grantsville, but is also somewhat neutral. But
I think at an elementary school you can make about any color.
Yeah.
yeah,
I'm just thinking as a parent, when they said it's Spirit Day, I have to find a maroon shirt.
Right.
I don't have very many maroon shirts. But we have blue as the other color, so it's
Yeah.
good. You know what I'm saying? So, yeah, I like it. Does anyone have anything strong? Well, let's listen to your motion. I think it's
okay.
great.
I move that we do green and black as the new 20 Wells elementary colors.
I'll second.
We have a motion, or what do you call it?
Do you have a motion?
Motion?
A motion
It has been moved.
that is, it's been moved by Valerie, seconded by Camille. Thank you. Moved by Valerie, seconded by Camille, for green and black as the colors of the 20 Wells Elementary. Do I have, is there any discussion to that motion? Okay, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. 20 Wells Elementary, they are the Tigers, and their colors are green and black. Look at that.
Already got the logo, a couple of
That
options
is
by Mark.
awesome.
There's one more item that I'd like for your consideration, and you don't have to make a decision on this tonight, but we would like some direction on, I remember a discussion about not bringing up boundaries, but boundaries are upon us for the elementary school. Not necessarily right now, but it will take us some time, and we would like you to consider whether you want to have us take care of that, which I would turn that over to Mark Ernst, and he can tell you how he would go about that. Basically, that's not as controversial as high school boundaries, because you're basically taking the attendance zone for Grantsville Elementary and the attendance zone for Willow, and you're putting two schools into three.
So A question.
And, yeah,
Just,
go ahead.
the agenda's really full,
Uh-huh.
and it feels like we don't even have ground broken, so couldn't we put off boundaries for another month or two? Even the conversation about it, I mean, we've got a lot other things to talk about and not get into boundary discussions tonight. Is that?
Dr. Ernst was going to pull some committees together, and we said, hang on, let's wait to see. All you need to tell us is whether you intend to, we're not wanting to do boundaries tonight, but whether you intend to have a company come in and do those, or you would like us to do those. If that's the case, you'll have multiple opportunities to look at different.
But
that's-
again, we're not even going to school for 2 years, or a year and a half at least, so could we just move on and not do anything yet?
That's certainly up to you. We just wanted you to give us some guidance, but if you're not ready to do that, that's appropriate as well.
I mean, maybe the board is.
I think the elementary boundaries.
We're just talking, we're not talking about high school and middle
Right, and I think they
school.
seem pretty easy in terms of, there's two elementaries, you're gonna take half of one, or, like, divide it three ways. I think Mark could go ahead and do that, but I feel like for the junior high and, high school, I would like to go out.
He was just, yeah.
Yeah, I was
mean,
just
but I'm
expressing just
saying,
the elementary,
So
but
that's, I think that one, we could at least give direction tonight without doing.
I feel comfortable giving direction on just the elementary with that, but is it an action item? Can we just kind of give him the go-ahead nod? Does anyone have?
I think we just can do it now.
we will,
Yeah.
that's all he
Okay.
needs to move forward, and then
So,
we'll bring you.
What are we nodding to? Like him forming committees to do the boundaries? Okay,
Just for the elementary.
okay. But you get like community members to decide those boundaries is how it works.
The plan was to get staff members and
They give the
parent members through
suggestion.
PTA, usually we get our volunteers that way, and
Okay.
administrators, as well as our data people, and basically look at Versatrans and bring you back 3 or 4 options that you can then vote on later. We didn't want to go down that and start preparing that if we wanted to go outside. That was the only question. Do we want to use outside on the elementary, or do we want to inside? So if you're comfortable with us just bringing you back some information, we'll do that, Scott, at a March or an April. We'll have some committee meetings and we'll get started. It may take into next year, but we want to be ready by this time next year with our boundaries. Sure.
Everyone's comfortable with Mark. You can get going on that. Okay, awesome. We are actually on schedule from my brain, Scott, Brian. Just wanted to let you know. This is just a casual work meeting, you guys. It's okay. We are going home. Okay, operations. This is when we're going to really dive into. We're so excited to have you guys here. Tough discussions based on the stuff that's on there. And let's turn the time over to you, Ian.
All right, well, this has been exciting so far, getting some new school names and just kind of getting there and getting real now. We're going to start getting some new schools. This is awesome. So thank you for letting me be here tonight. So I just kind of wanted to go through capital for next year with you guys. I think the best approach is to let you kind of drive your questions towards me so I can answer that. We can kind of go through all of that and kind of the idea behind this year. I've brought Mike Garcia with me tonight, so if you have any of the new construction, some of those bigger projects, I'll turn over the time to him to answer some of your questions regarding those new transportation buildings, the Stansbury High School cafeteria addition, and also Ivanpah Elementary School. So he can answer those questions. He's been the one that's been the lead on that and has been working with that. So any questions that I'll have Mike answer for you. But diving into capital, you can see that if there's any questions or whatever you can address to me, I will answer at the best I can.
The real question is for Lark.
Yeah. So
Do you have a
there we go.
bank, do you have a secret account for this?
You want to talk about the process for new board members of how we develop an outlay?
Yeah, we can discuss that. So early into January, we pushed out a request to all of our building administrations and our directors and our heads of departments to come up with their top 5 requests for their buildings for the following year in request. We give them a month to go through that, to meet with staff, teachers, members of the community that are involved with their schools, to come up with those requests, what would best be served for their facilities to better improve the learning environment for our students. And This year it was as unique as we've gone through and did our security and safety assessment with MHTN and Les Nichols, and so we've brought on Jeff Wyatt to be involved with that to kind of look at some of our security and safety needs as well this year. After we received all those requests, we compiled them, and then we met as a group. Jeff Wyatt, Director of Safety and Security, Kevin England, Facilities Maintenance Director, Dr. Rogers is on that, Mike Garcia with New Construction Coordinator, Lark Reynolds, our BA, and then Dustin Nelson, our IT Director, all met together to go through and kind of prioritize the request for this year. So that's kind of the process, and then I compiled that, took that information, put it back, and then that's what's before you tonight, so.
It's very typical for us to have much more in requests than we have money. Every year, we probably have twice the amount of requests than we actually have funding in the budget to take care of. So we try to go through a process of prioritization and whether or not this item has been on the list for, multiple times, and what the need is and the safety involved and how many students does it impact, and does everybody get something that they need to keep, depending on the age of the building. There's lots of variables, but we never have enough money to get all of the projects done. We have to kind of do a triage, if you will.
Correct. So yeah, so as you look through that, we get requests that we could handle today through our maintenance department and have them resolved very quickly to very large multi-million-dollar type projects. If you look at all the requests combined, if we were to do everything, it would be a little over $21 million to do all the requests that we received this year. So, so as you can kind of see, what Dr. Rogers is talking about, how many requests that we received. So we've categorized them down. The yellow is what the district has recommended that we do for this following year. Pink boxes are boxes that will be handled through our district-wide budgets that we have every year. Blues through our technology department. Orange is going to fall under our safety and security concerns. The green is for potential bond or other means to accomplish those. Those are the much larger ones. This year you saw turf fields. Stansbury High requested to put turf down on their football stadium, as well as if we were going to do that, that would probably mean 2 other schools would be involved with that as well. Purple boxes then are our custodial needs for keeping our buildings safe and clean. So as you go
Break
down
that
there,
down into those different budgets, because Lark has requested that we look at locale and how we're spending money, because we're asked to do reports to USBE that says how much money are you spending at different buildings. So there's a location code, as well as what budget does it fall under, like is it roofing, is it painting, is it carpet, is it technology? That's what the color code is.
correct. And then I went through and broke those down. So instead of looking at just the first tier, this part that it's on the screens is just kind of the major overview. Then I went and put everything together as yellow projects and orange projects so you could see them really easily. From last year's budget to this year's budget, we have dialed back on yellow projects. We were at $3.3 million last year in yellow projects that were approved. We're at $838,500 this year. And the reason we brought those back is so we could do some more with safety and security. It would give us a year to catch up on some of those projects from last year and make sure those are all completed. Also, we have invested a lot of time with our state fire marshal, going through our buildings and making sure those are up to code in regards to fire code. And there's some issues that we've encountered that we're working on getting resolved too. That's going to take a lot of our manpower and our time through our maintenance department to get those resolved. So we felt like this year would be a good year to kind of lower down the yellow capital request and kind of focus more on some of those more important issues.
There always seems to be some items that come up are kind of a surprise, like chiller at Stansbury, the air conditioning and the
Correct.
HVAC that wasn't on the list to request, but is definitely a serious issue. We had the chiller at Grantsville High School, I think, a couple of years ago. So there are always a few of those, we better get on this. We didn't, this has worn out its life expectancy, and we need to prioritize that as well.
Right, and come to the chiller, that's a big project that we need to accomplish. We've had a lot of issues in making sure that building is not 1,000 degrees in there when kids come back to school, and so we want to make sure that's taken care of now, so we make sure we keep those kids comfortable at Stansbury High School. So that was one that our maintenance director was an issue that he felt very strongly that we get accomplished this year. So that's a little bit larger expense, but it's one of those things that's necessary for the district and for Stansbury High School. So what questions can I answer for you guys so I go in the right direction? Because I could talk about this all night long and really get into the weeds, but I just want to make sure I answer your guys' questions.
Can you speak to how, because I know like the bids go out for example, doing turf on the fields or like the bus garage or different things like that. Can you kind of speak to how, like what that process is and how, I mean, I know that there's an RFP, right?
Yeah, I'll let Mike talk about that. I let Mike do all that work for me. He's the one that's been doing it the last little while, so he has more experience than I do. So,
because I know a lot of the bids that came back were a lot higher than we originally anticipated, right? And so I'm just kind of curious about those as well.
Yeah, we have some information on that. I'll let Mike kind of explain some of that process.
Thank you.
All right, so we've done that a couple of ways. I mean, the one that we do actually, we went out to bid, was the IBAPA replacement. And to catch some of the new board members up to speed, a few years ago, it was decided to replace the Vernon Elementary. And we knew that the needs would be similar between Vernon and IBAPA, so we kind of intended that building to be able to be replicated out there. So Vernon just completed this last school year, and IBAPA went out to bid a couple weeks ago, and that was under a CMGC. We had a construction manager hired to handle small projects from the previous bond, and so this is the last of those projects. So that's how that one went out. We had them under contract as our construction manager, and so they went out and got bids, and so that's where you see that one coming in at.
I'm sorry, but where's that in the packet? I don't see am I blind?
The bids?
For IBAPA. I honestly didn't,
Was that in there?
The process is right.
because I didn't see it, but it's probably there in one of those many pages of.
So yeah, it's on, I don't know what sheet it would be, but after you get through all the schools, there is a new construction line on that.
I just saw actually just on the board docs, just where it said the estimated cost for new construction.
Where are you guys looking?
I'm on the main page of board docs.
Content, and there's also
But even executive content, I would just like to be able to see what you're all speaking to, so I'm not finding it, guys.
Yeah, it's on the one that has all of the title, and it's,
the one that looks like that on the screen, Scott?
Yes? What page is that on? I mean, where is it on that document? I don't see it.
After all the schools, then they get into district, and one of them is called new construction. What page is that?
Six page.
District-wide budgets, is that what we're talking about?
not a district-wide budget, it's just on the,
It's the main overview.
It's 6.
yeah, it looks like it's on page 6, about halfway down.
Okay, I'm clearly,
Just
oh,
about,
new construction,
Right
13,
there.
Yeah.
$13 million.
So some of those,
Okay, I'm there,
oh, there it is.
page 6.
so those were some estimates that we got from our different teams that we're working with.
We had sticker shock, Scott, because we did
What did we do Vernon for?
Vernon for Steve, 3.5,
3.8.
3.8.
So we're it's 2 million more than what Vernon was.
Right, and there were some, I mean, there's a few issues that have caused that with IBAPA. One, if you've been to Home Depot and seen how much lumber has gone up,
Yeah.
and that's a stick frame building. So that's some of the increase. Also, we have no fire protection out there. Vernon, we have a water system, we have fire hydrants. We are the water system out there. We've got wells that we have to pump. We actually supply some tanks to the fire department out there. They hook into our water. And so because of that, the state fire marshal required a little bit more fire protection. We had to put some additional layers of sheetrock. And again, mentioning the wells, because we're on wells, they need a lot of rehab. They're quite old and haven't had a lot done with them, and to use them as culinary sources, they need some work done with them. So there's just some, and the fact that it's IBAPA. It's from Salt Lake, Vernon is an hour and a half.
Yeah.
you're 3 hours one way. So we always kind of anticipated it would be around a 20-25% increase going out to Ibapaw from Vernon. And if you break out the building costs alone, we're at about a 19% increase, which I think is pretty good considering the average escalation in construction's been about 8% the last few years. So we're right in line with that, especially considering the distance that.
So an observation, I
Yeah.
guess, it's kind of, your comment about the wells kind of caught my attention, because the reality is, the wells that we're using now then, what that is implying to me is that the wells we're using now have those same problems, right?
Right, there's,
And so my point was, if there's concern that the current wells aren't safe at the current school,
but currently they're not being used for culinary, but part of this
Oh, they're
also
not?
includes stubbing in for additional housing for teachers out there. So this includes some of those infrastructure costs, which my understanding is needs to happen anyway. So either way, I think we do need to do some work on the wells. They are being tested. The ones that are being used for culinary are being tested. But part of the issue is water in general. The wells, the levels have dropped over the years. We're still fine now, but if we're just drawing off of that one, we could potentially have to, that's where it's beneficial to be able to use both wells as culinary sources, just to make sure that we have enough water.
student count, I don't know who's off the top of your head, and comparable to Vernon. Okay. I just wondered if it was a smaller student population, if we could cut some square footage. That was, but they're pretty comparable.
I think that what you're seeing on the wells, though, just to kind of, because that falls kind of in some areas that I deal with. I think, there's some state regulations that you have to prove up on wells and things
Right.
occasionally, and you have to do so much in order to keep them up to date. But because of drought and because of different things, most people, if they're doing all the prove up at this point in time, which is a smart idea, in my opinion, they are also going to go a little bit deeper because water tables have shrunk down. And it's getting a little harder in some areas for the water to be pumped and not pump silt. And so I think that's kind of what you're talking about, Mike.
Correct, yeah. I mean, our idea with this is we haven't looked too deep into what it would take to just remodel Ibapaw and get it up to get us another 25 years or so. But we feel this is a good 7,500-year building. I don't know how many of you have been out to Vernon. I was just out there a couple days ago, yesterday, day before, and talking to the teachers out there, and they just saying how happy they are. They just love it out there. But we feel that doing these things now, I mean, again, we're talking about the escalation costs. It's never going to be cheaper than right now, and that's not the only reason to do it, because that's the same with everything. But if it's something we're going to have to do, I think it's definitely worth taking a look at, because after looking at some of the numbers, I do feel that they're high, but I think they're in line with kind of the state, what's going on at the state with school construction and construction in general.
It's interesting that they were having, at the legislature, they were having a big debate on, how they've been pretty critical of Corner Canyon High and Taj Mahal, those kind of bills. But they looked at the cost per square footage at Corner Canyon, and everybody said, we would love to build a school in today's dollar for the cost that they did per square foot at Corner Canyon, because it's gone up even beyond that square foot wise, which is, they took a lot of heat for building a pretty elaborate building, but per square foot.
And that is one of the issues with Ibapaw that makes the square foot price, I mean, it's a total anomaly in the state. There's very few schools out there, and I mean, even the other necessary small schools aren't quite that remote. But when we're only 9,000 square feet, but we're putting in a lot of those same systems that we put in a high school for building automation, for security, for door access control, normally you have 70,000 more square feet to take up some of those costs. The kitchen equipment alone is about $100,000, and that would be roughly the same in an elementary, like the new one in Grantsville, 20 Wells, but you have all those classroom spaces to kind of help offset that. So it does get very high on the square footage cost. And that's, what we were looking at one that was done up in Snowville, and it was hard to compare because it was that was 10 years ago. It was bid in 2011, and from another school done in that same district, it was about 54% more per square foot when they did that one, and Snowville's not as near as remote as Ibapaw. So that would be, I know there was some discussion, it was a couple years ago we brought this up, but like that one is been out to bid. They're still working on getting the numbers. They've dropped about 200,000 since they first gave us the numbers. They're still trying to clean them up a little bit. And I was surprised actually how much coverage we had. We had a lot of roofers look at this. We had a lot of different subs. So I really feel like we got good numbers. We had a lot of people looking at it, I think more on some of them than we had at Vernon. I think there's just that a little bit of uncertainty with the market, and government jobs are generally seem to be safe. They know they're going to get paid. They know it's steady work for the next year or so. But any other questions on?
I just have another question. Can you talk to the transportation buildings and the cost with that as well?
A little bit. Those are very preliminary numbers. We also have a construction manager on board with that, and that's with Westland Construction. And they just got brought on board about a month ago. And so as soon as we got them on board, we had them dive into the plans and get us those estimates. And we just got some of those numbers today, but when you come back for the square footage price, what we're getting over there, our square footage price is well below the average, even for the normal kind of the build of that sort, remodels coming into an existing space. There's just a lot of issues in those 60, 70-year-old buildings. For example, the fire sprinkler systems we're basically told they basically shot. They're original, and so they need a total rework. So that's, I do have it broken down. I mean, just cutting in for the bus garage alone, cutting in 47 different doors to fit all of the buses in there. That adds a lot to our structural costs. That the building's supported by the columns, but we have the shear walls that when we take out so much wall, we're taking out more wall than we're leaving in just about. So we're having to beef up the structure a lot to make that work. And then we're having to plug in all of those buses. So we're doing a lot of electrical. I mean, it's basically, all new electrical system. We've got to add HVAC that wasn't there before. There's codes to ventilating when you have those buses in those spaces. So we've tried to keep it as minimal as possible, but when you get 90,000 square feet on one of those, 180 between both, it's a lot of square footage to deal with.
I get it. Okay.
I have a
Thank
question.
you.
I have a question on. Bob, do you have one first?
Go ahead.
Okay, so I could be remembering wrong, and I'm sorry if I remember wrong. When we bought those 90,000 square foot buildings, we were talking about retrofitting them like you're talking about, but I don't remember it costing, our thought costing $5 million. But I thought it was going to be like 1 or 2, which is still, anyways.
That's correct. That was the estimate.
That was the estimate. So are we saying, and maybe this is where the discussion is coming in, that makes me a little nervous that we're retrofitting this 60 or 70-year-old building, right? That's how old it is, costing us $5 million. Is there other options? Or is this the best option still? The locations, I just want to make sure that if there's other suggestions or if we can brainstorm,
You remember that the original thinking was, let's buy some land and put up some metal buildings. And then when we got these at a discounted, really low, and we're told that it wouldn't take much to retrofit them, went in and kind of did our own estimate. Now that a company architect and a construction manager have come in, it's grown into what we're concerned about maybe being a money pit. And is it better to go back to the original plan, which is buy 15 acres? If you remember, one of the things we wanted to do was have a place where our people could park and where our buses could park. Right now they're on a slanted 4-acre. it's pretty slippery out there, and so we wanted more space because it's really, we're parking 100 buses on 4 acres. It's just really not. We need more like 15 acres. We also talked about a fueling site for CNG to save money and go green a little bit, and what we could do there with some incentives. So that when we got these numbers back, it begs the question of, is that the best way to go, or should we go to a plan B?
Because, I'm sorry. Well, a covered bus garage is cool. I mean, but the reality is, I think maybe that's what we're all thinking. You can pay 15 acres for less than $5 million. I'm going to go out on a limb. I don't know the cost to put parking lot down, but I'll bet it's less than $5 million.
Yeah.
And granted, we have to have some building for the mechanics and for the offices, but you don't need, every bus doesn't have to be inside. And I realize that we talked about that there was some savings opportunities, the bus life and those things. But I would classify that as, we thought it was a win because we thought, okay, for $1 million or $2 million, we could do this. But where it's more than double, there's still property around, right? And we had property available here on, if I recall, on this campus or in this general vicinity.
We also own 12 acres in Grantsville. Now, granted, that's not centralized for buses, right? They're not centralized right now in Tooele either, and we do the whole county.
Right,
but we do have that lot.
But we could
west side.
we could sell that property and find some property here of 12 to 15 acres, and you could, I don't know, I'm wondering if, when do we have to be out of there at a certain time in Tooele? Existing?
The city partners and also on Warehouse 2, the Tooele Tech, they didn't get their funding, so they're not going to be able to expand into that building. So the short answer is by August of 22, but not this year.
So we've got time
21.
to tap the brakes.
We've got time to kind of reassess and see if this is the way we want to go or another way.
And I just want to understand as well, because you talked about the construction manager and the bids and stuff. Is it possible that we could get additional bids that might be less, or this is the direction?
For the warehouses, it's just, they're just giving us some budget numbers. They've
Okay.
talked to, I mean, the lady working with Jessica, I mean, she's been doing this for 16 years. I feel confident with her numbers being close. And like I said, this is very preliminary, so we could definitely get this down as we look into some value engineering and some other things. Just that was as soon as we got them on board, we sent them to work to get us some estimates.
Okay.
And so these aren't hard bid on the warehouses. This was just looking at what it's going to take. And some of this was, and I'll tell you, this isn't the full dollar amount. We're looking at more. This was kind of what we wanted for this year to get started because we were phasing things out. Because originally we did have that that hard deadline of August 1st of this year to be out. So this was just to get the buses and the mechanics over there. This would leave the rest of the building untouched.
Right. I'm just trying to figure out, I mean, it's just such a huge difference than what we were originally told. But then I'm also trying to figure, there's other companies over there, and I doubt they spent $5 million for their build. So I'm just trying to figure out what the difference is, why it'd be
Well,
such a
but Camille, they're having
different-
to structurally like cut
Right.
the walls out, and I
And
mean,
that's
like you
makes
said, they're
sense.
all because they're all like
Right.
Right.
garage doors
I mean,
that
we
we're
have to
putting in,
upgrade
right?
the service to the whole site. I mean, just those doors alone, I'd have to find
So
them
how
out,
does
but
UTA get their buses over there? Do they have it
they don't have
ventilated and
88
stuff?
buses. I mean, that's our problem. We've got 88 buses we're trying to fit in there. I'm not sure how many they have. They just use the one door, and I haven't been over to UTA. I think you went there before, Dustin. They just kind of pull them in and move around the columns.
So they don't have separate garages for each of them.
Right.
But then the ventilation and stuff, do they have all of that? Do you know?
I'm not sure.
But they don't have the 88 buses. That's a function of, they don't have 88 buses, and it's just a function of.
And we went as cheap as we could on the ventilation. It's just
Emissions
some fans.
levels.
Yeah.
And if
Right.
the levels get too high, we've got X number of doors that will open up a certain amount to be our return or their air supply and
Right.
pull it out. I mean, we looked at more expensive options.
The
That was
fact that we're a
cheapest we
public
could
school
find.
drives their cost up just because of fire marshal and Division of Building Safety. It's more expensive to do stuff with Division of Building Safety. It really is. I don't know if, even though is UTA a state-owned or is it private? I know they're
State.
funded, but it's kind of a
entity.
pseudo, yeah.
But I had heard at one point, Scott, that they had like 50 to 80 buses or something crazy in there. Like, it's a huge amount.
Don't they just keep the Tooele buses here? I mean, it's just a handful. It's not.
I've driven past.
I don't know.
It's pretty open in there. It's been a while since I've looked in there when we were driving past and the doors were open. I mean, we can fit 44 on one side if we stack them end to end. So they'd have I think they're only in half of one building. So they'd have a hard time fitting too many in there.
Yeah, that's true. Okay.
And we,
Bob?
I wasn't in on the original discussion, but it sounds like to me we have a little bit of time to at least explore some different opportunities, you know, and maybe this comes back and maybe this is the most viable option. But I think at this point, if we're looking for direction, I think we ought to just, you know, I agree with Scott. I think we ought to look at some possible options of what we do. I do like the idea of a centralized area, you know, and it's close to this area and things, but you know, maybe the sale of some property or whatever you know, some of those things you suggested. But you know, I don't think you just throw this out. I mean, I think you have to make a comparison at that point in time and look at maybe a plan B or a plan C or a couple plans, and then let's look and see what really is the most viable and what will work for us.
mm-hmm. And that's kind of the direction we've gone after these numbers came in. We did talk a little bit with superintendent, so we've kind of put this project on hold, so we're not accruing more costs on, you know, design fees where we have that time now, we can figure out what's actually the best way.
We need to clarify that we can't go out, Camille, and ask another group without going through the procurement process, because we've signed we've awarded architect and awarded a construction manager. Now you could say, look, we didn't get adequate, and rebid the process, but you can't just ask for a second group to come in.
I don't know that we're going to get dramatically different. You might get, you know, 10% savings or something, but you're not going to see. What I might ask, and recognizing you put on hold, but one of the things, and I suspect you'd already do that, but, and again, I'm only one of 7, so I'm not, but it feels like I would love to see at least what it would take just to do a outdoor parking lot with appropriate shop and office space, and just do it that way, somewhere in the same proximity.
Right.
And at least that gives us to what, you know, at least Apple, you know, we can at least compare and say, okay, well, if we spend this, it's this, and if we spend this, it's this, and we give it some alternatives. I'd like to at least see that as, at least as a board member, it would make me feel better about either decision.
And you potentially have, if you went in that direction, and whatever the price tag would be there, you have the $3 million, and we would have to sell those buildings, but you have that investment. They were appraised at higher than that, and of course we got some donation, you know, through Peterson's, and we're very appreciative of that. But we would have, after the sale of those, we would have income to, you know, be able to apply towards the bus shop.
Bob?
Well, and you know, I think it was Scott that said that there is a savings by parking them all inside. And again, I wasn't in that initial discussion, but if you start making all these comparisons, you know, that would be a valid comparison. Does it warrant that, you know? And I think those are the things that we have to really, you know, be informed on, so.
No, and we can get, like I said, we have Westland Construction on board. They'd be more than capable to get us some rough numbers on square footage that we would need and some costs to build our own on a empty site. So yeah, we can get that.
I'm sorry. I just feel better if I could at least have.
No, I totally.
Well, it's on hold. At least I think it would be minimal cost to at least do a mock-up of what and get some property costs and say, okay, well, for this much money we could do.
Right. I know that VCBO, who we're working with a couple of years ago, did one up in, what was that one? Box Elder. I knew it was up north a little bit. They did one that was a pretty similar need to what we had. So, I mean, we could even, take some of that. We could probably figure out some rough numbers.
As a third option, there is the Conestoga Wood Building. Now it's 10 million, and of course that's, you know, sticker shock as well. But my fear is that what we're talking about now with $3 million plus $5 million, we're at 8, and it's not even done. So that begs the question of, that 120,000 square foot building that has shop doors and air and all that stuff, would that be better than what we're currently at? I'm not suggesting that. I'm just saying that is another option on the, a third choice. And we can cost that out for you as well and give you several different, scenarios.
One thing I'd like to add to these two buildings that I'm concerned about coming into the project a little bit later and looking at it is the two current buildings, 647 and 649, are landlocked. So we're going to be in the same situation here a few years down the road that we're currently in on our current property as well. And that was a big concern of mine, is that 88 buses, that doesn't even get all of our fleet inside right now. We're building 3 new schools, the county's growing, and so we're going to be adding more and more buses to our fleet, and so those buses will not even fit on that current site as now. So that's my biggest concern with that, is that you're starting to put a lot of money into something that's landlocked, and that we're going to be looking at, hey, we're going to have to build second sites, which aren't a horrible option. A lot of school districts have remote site where they park their buses. Alpine has 2 different sites. Multiple big districts have multiple sites to park their buses and have transportation facilities like that. But just so you know, that we are pretty landlocked where we currently are. There are railroad tracks and crossings for our buses to have to cross coming out of those facilities. So those are things we've taken into consideration. And so I think it was a great thing. Dr. Rogers went to the city and went to T-Tech and had them expand our deadlines out so we could have a little bit more time to think about this. So I just want to let you know that we have a little bit of window to really think about what we want to do. Because my concern is I don't want to get us into a situation where we're trying to reevaluate this a few years down the road and say, where are we at? And then we're throwing money at something else. I'd rather do it right, do it the correct way, where it's going to be able to give us an opportunity to kind of take on the growth of our transportation department and our district as well. So that was kind of something I wanted to add to it.
Agree, and I appreciate that.
So if we're putting this on hold, is this what, right? We put this on hold, is that what?
Like the staff has already done.
We've already put it on.
Yes, yeah.
Our discussion today is things seem to be coming in really high. We wanted you to have an opportunity not to approve the capital because that will come back to you in March for approval.
Yeah.
We wanted you to give us input on these different schools and ask questions and give us input on the capital outlay. These are projects that are above and beyond capital outlay that are a lot more expensive, and there's 3 of them: Ibapaw School, the bus shop, and
Cafeteria.
very high cafeteria, which came in a lot higher than we expected.
So
That come in double what we thought, or do we know? It says 2.3. I always thought it was around a mil. But I don't remember. What were we thinking? Do you remember?
I was thinking 1.3, 1.5.
Okay, that's what I'm remembering too. So it actually, yeah, okay.
And we don't have anybody on board. We just have we do have some updated numbers that's come in since I submitted the request. And the architect's estimating about 1.8 right now.
Here's my concern for you to think about, and I'm not trying to, but if these numbers are coming in high, my mind automatically goes to the new school projects. We have capital reserve. I think we've got to hold on to that capital reserve for those 3 projects. Now, Lark and I talked today about another financing option. I want to call on him to talk to you about that. Scott, you're just going to have to put your head over your...
I'm telling Lark, don't even
Scott,
say
just
the words.
stop. Scott.
Don't say the word...
Julia will also
Don't say the word MBA.
If you say MBA, I'm walking out the room.
Okay, Lark, you heard it. Don't say MBA.
That is not even a...
Wait, do we
Julia
need to
and I
let,
are not even having that conversation.
should we let them finish really quick, or do we switch over? What do you?
Well, can we just talk, so just to close the loop on Stansberry, just because we've talked about the other 2. At the moment, that's kind of on hold, is what I'm hearing. And, I mean, I just wanted to, if there's anybody who wants to talk about Stansberry, it feels like to me that's the right thing to do. That's just my 2 bits.
All 3 of those are on hold.
Although,
All 3 of those are on hold.
I don't know that you, personally, then again, this is, but it feels like that Ibapaw thing.
We meet with the tribe
Is
next
more.
week, and we don't dare say, still on hold on these 3 projects, so that one is really hard from an equity discussion to say no to, because it will be made in, possibly into a equity or racial type of, or ethnic kind of a
And there was,
We wanna avoid that.
I mean, it was approved, it was on the track. It feels like that one needs to probably leave the station, and the other ones, maybe they sit back. That's just,
That would be my opinion.
So,
you're feeling the same way, Bob.
With your, if you all have that sense, and I don't need a, we'll move in that direction, but the other 2 we've kind of placed on hold. It's really important that you deliver those 3 new schools without going over budget, and so we need to keep a lot of our capital reserve.
But you really need to do IBPA.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know that that's
I-
necessarily.
I don't think that's an,
I hear you.
and on the,
Yeah,
because we
I would
approved, that
agree.
was one of the first things we approved back when we got on the
I
board,
agree,
right? Like,
yeah.
it's been 2 years ago,
they've
maybe,
been
or a year.
asking for a new school.
When it comes back that much higher,
But I don't think we're that much
I
higher.
always pump the brakes and say, what do you guys think? Is this still within what you
So,
wanted to do?
so just a little bit of a breakdown. You see that whole wide total, right? You have, it came in at 3.8. This one's at 5. As you look at that and you just break down the building, being a repeat on the building, and you kind of take out some of the landscape and some of these other unknowns, you're really not that much higher at IVAPA. It's some of those other unknowns that IVAPA brings in, right? Mike discussed the wells, some of the other issues out there, and so that kind of tacks a little bit on it. But comparing the apples to apples, like you wanted, Scott, building to building, the increase on that is very, it's not the $2 million. It's not we're building in, that building's costing, it's all the other factors. of
Sure,
IVAPA
and
that
you're gonna
come
have
into
those.
that.
I mean,
So-
it's just,
and so we can get you guys that information as well, so you can see that exactly where those costs are going. Some things, the landscape, we actually save money, a little bit of money on the landscape compared to Vernon, just because of the site work and some different things that happen with, as you look at the earthwork, demo of current buildings and stuff like that, those prices are changing that final number as well. And we can get you guys that information, so you guys can see the breakdown completely.
It appears that there's just a lot of more infrastructure type stuff associated with IVAPA.
Correct.
That's basically what you're looking at, is just infrastructure. And really, I guess realistically, the infrastructure is going to have to be done whether you put a new building in or whether you didn't put a new building in. And so you're still out, you're still spending the money.
We're
So-
still spending the money, and then, don't forget the location of IVAPA.
Yeah.
That's a big issue. That drives up some costs with across all the trades.
Yeah, I like it out there.
We'll just make Bob drive everything out.
Okay, so is everyone comfortable with that discussion on those 3 big projects that we,
Now, if you want to go and delve into school by school and look at what our recommendations are and the funding sources there, and have any questions about why we didn't recommend some and recommended others?
So can I ask a question, or a couple questions? And this is more about just educating Bob, I guess. Because as I was looking at, and I really appreciate, by the way, gentlemen, the list that was put together. It's fantastic. It's easy for me to understand. But I had a question, and it was on the potential bond. Is that on the new bond? Is that money that would come out of the new bond?
No,
Or
that
is
would
that
be,
money out
that
of
would
the
be
old bond?
future discussion, not current stuff. That would be future discussion if we came to us and we wanted to put turf fields on all of our football fields.
So that would be a
future
potential
discussion.
bond that we would ask for.
That would be your guys' decision.
Or Lark's MBA.
Those are just major projects.
it's not my MBA.
So what I guess what I'm getting at, because, there's a couple of us that just went through that great time of meeting the public and elections and things like that. And one of the things that I kept hearing is, if we're gonna vote, because I was out advocating for the bond, if we're gonna vote for the bond, this is how we, are you going to build other things that have never been talked about? And so that's just why I'm asking that question.
No, these would be other.
This would be a future bond.
discussions, correctly.
Okay,
This isn't.
that helps me a lot. Then Ian and I spent quality time about 2 years ago and did a tour of all the shops.
We did. It was a great.
So tell me about the auto lift at Tooele High School. Is that the old orange lift that got taken out 2 years ago? That still hasn't been replaced?
Yeah, that was requested by Mike Florence with the CTE program, that he felt like that was a safety issue and needed to have that replaced over there.
Well, I know 2 years ago, while I was still with the district, maybe it's almost 3 years ago, I can't remember, but we had it removed. We had the 4-post one removed because of safety issues. Because each of those lifts have to go through a yearly inspection, whether they're workable, whether they're not. So is that what we're replacing, Ian? Is that orange one that was taken out?
I believe so. I'd have to verify with Mike, but I believe that was the one that was on the list.
That's really all my questions that I came up.
This is, I'm not even sure if this is, well, I guess each board member decides for themselves what they want to ask about. I also wanted to kind of, and this isn't, I guess, so much a question as a pitch, because when I saw that proposal about the turf field at Stansbury High, and we explored that possibility as a board to add that to the bond, and ultimately based on survey responses elected against it. But for 2 reasons, I think we should strongly consider attempting in some fashion, whether it's through bond, I guess if bond is the only option, then it's the only option, to install turf fields at all 4 schools. The first is, my understanding is that with the new high school, we are going to install a turf field. That would be my expectation. And I think we have an interest as a community at having 4 schools who are all can field, no pun intended, field competitive teams, and not, provide kind of, if that's considered an advantage, to one of the 4. The other thing is the water situation. And toward the end of the school year, toward the end of our football season this year at Grantsville, it was more dust than grass on the field. And, I get we're in drought conditions, whatever the water was turned off, whatever the explanation is. But it really becomes a safety issue at that point that, I think we need to strongly consider. So I'm not, it's not an action item today or anything like that, but I think it's time.
I think we would agree with you. It's certainly a lot cheaper when you build new school to do turf then. And I know you had the history of that discussion with Stansbury. Things that have changed since then is, first of all, soccer. UHSA really wants you to play soccer in the football stadium. Now, football coaches don't necessarily like that because there are different lines on their field that they're not used to.
Hate it.
Right? But they've had so many problems with fans and parents being down on the field right next to officials and players with sportsmanship and yellow cards and just crowd control that they have said, we want you to play soccer in your football fields, in your stadiums, so that there's an actual barrier, right, separation, the track from that. The second thing is we've come a long way since it was black rubber material that increased the heat from the field in the summer. The material now is cork-like. It's not rubber-like. It doesn't retain the same kind of the heat, and so it's a little bit hotter than sod, but it doesn't require as much water. Now, it's kind of a wash when it comes to cost. Water, you still have to water the field, but it's more water to reconstitute and clean and keep dust down. You still have to have some water. But to give you an example, I mean, if we're doing turf on the new fields, definitely for equity reasons, we're going to have teams that are going to want to be on that field year-round. I'm talking about lacrosse. And when you do soccer and lacrosse on a football field, you cannot keep it up with turf. Just football wears it out to where it's dust. When you start playing soccer, so it's a matter of usability, not, plus they've come a long way, and it's actually safer as far as the trips and falls and the gophers, and we do a good job of that pest management, but there are some issues with some of our soccer fields being a little bumpy right. So what we would have to do, in my mind, is if we did that at the new school, then we could possibly, without doing a bond, now we'll have to ask Lark what he thinks about this, but we have capital, and we could probably do a field a year on capital and say, okay, Tooele High, you just got a new softball, baseball, Grantsville or Stansbury, you a first year, we'll have a NBA lottery for who gets the, but at least if we
You guys
told
got
them,
a
hey,
locker room.
within 3 years, the 4 big high schools are going to do that. They don't play football and use the field at Windover or at Dugway the same way that they do here in the valley. And but I think we'd have to have a plan, Alan, that would say, hey, we can't do them all in one fell swoop, but I think we could use capital to do.
And not discounting that, I think exactly what you said, for the equity problem, if you do one, you gotta do them all. And so, with this, specific to this year's request, where Stansbury's asking for one, well, we're not gonna do Stansbury without a plan. I think
Oh,
what the
absolutely.
superintendent's suggesting makes sense.
And that's in my
The-
notes.
My other thought was, though, that maybe it's not this year, simply because, coming back to the IBAPA discussion, we've already committed to that. We've got to find $5 million, and we're not going to spend $1 million of that capital in lieu of, we're not going to put a turf field in lieu of IBAPA's school, so.
The new high school was ready to go by, was it 22, 23, I mean?
25.
It would be the year after 23 that we would start. to
Or,
work
or
on
even
that.
maybe you could get one in even that same year. It depends on how the budget works, but it's
So
not this
kinda,
year.
to kind of add to that, so I had a really good discussion with Tooele High School athletic director and kind of their whole athletic department a couple weeks ago regarding this, and I've also discussed this with Grantsville High School athletic director and administration there as well. And so as we were looking through this, we've already started conversations with these companies to see what it would take to come in and put these in. And it would be, I think it would have been very beneficial if we had a plan going on, like Dr. Rogers said, year after year, and we could bring somebody on under that same contract and get that bid, and so then it would just follow. We would get this done, and so it wouldn't be a bunch of separate bids, and so we could do it all up front.
And you
say,
could
this
maybe
is
even
the
lock your price in at the beginning of that
and then this will be
3-year
the time
cycle.
frame,
and-
this school will be this next, and then kind of move through the time frame. And so we've already started those conversations. After we saw this come up, we knew it was going to be a topic. I am from Grantsville, and I did witness Grantsville High School's football field too, and it was not a good impression of what Tooele County School District athletic field should look like. It was very embarrassing, and so
Well, and we're one of the few districts in this state that still doesn't have the, I mean, we are an exception, and I
Still don't.
yeah, but anyways. But we talked about we talk about this, you guys. We are a big district. We just got our own region. We are a big district, and this doesn't just benefit football players. It's football, it's soccer, it's lacrosse, it's band, it's color, right? Don't they then have access to practice on that? I mean, it really does affect a lot of things.
Where you run into problems is, okay, we're getting a turf field. Could you guys take our 6-lane track and go to 8-lane track? And could we get more bleachers? And could we get a new concession stand? And what if you're not, you get that scope creep. Am I right, Steve? You get that additional, okay, so we meet with a school, we're going to do turf. It would be really nice if we put this in and put this in at the same time and put this in. Now you're not talking about 1.5 million. Now you're talking about 3 million because, well, at Tooele, you're landlocked on that hill. You can't do 8-lane track. At Grantsville, you could, but you'd have to move that whole visitor site. You'd have to redo how that's laid out. Now, the new high school, it's probably a little bit easier. You just care about football. As long as track is, I'm teasing you.
track too.
But if you want to do a district, if you want to host a district track meet, you got to have 8 lanes. You can't have it on a 6-lane track.
Well, so do we have 8 lanes anywhere yet?
No, we don't.
But
Except
we will, the new high school, I'm assuming?
Stansbury
Oh,
has 8.
okay.
Okay, I'm
But
sorry.
I would hope that we would also put it at the new
We
high
would
school.
move it
Okay.
up to that standard. We're just kind of landlocked at Tooele High, and the cost would be very high at
Astronomical,
Grantsville to move
yeah.
it to that.
Okay, moving.
Does that answer some of your question, Alan, to that?
Very helpful.
Okay.
Thank you.
Oh, okay. Any more questions? Did we sum that up?
Lark
No.
wants to talk
I
about.
was like, I just want to hear from Lark about the
I'll
money.
I'll
and-
walk out and then we can have Lark talk about NBA bonds, so I don't go into
yeah.
seizures.
Scott, we need you. You're one of 7.
And I'm just wondering if we can use CARES money for anything. I'm just gonna throw that out there.
Hey,
I just wanted to, and I won't talk about MBA if you don't. I mean, it is a valid option, and I want to say, because we've gotten in, there's an issue if you don't do it right.
hold the mic up a little bit more. Sorry.
It's not coming, okay. There'd be an issue if you don't do it right. But I think this has been a healthy discussion. That's why I've been listening in, unless you wanted me to add something else on MBA. But, and I will circle around to what I want to say when it comes to, and I've been saying this in our first meeting. I realize that we brought this forward as called a read or whatever for you to look at. But I actually go to the bottom line page, which happens to be the very last one in there. It has the budgets. And I do that because you need to know how much money do we have. And this is where I use the classic example of one of my colleagues of you can do anything you want, you just can't do everything. And when it comes to capital, that's how it is. We've talked about so many projects in here. I think I said this a few months ago when there was a potential other project coming up. And we have to, as a group, decide what our priorities are. And I say that because this, in my opinion, because of all the requests this year, is a perfect time to say no. And the reason I say that is because we have our biggest project in my mind are the 3 bond projects we have coming up that we may have to put some of them on hold. And so when you look at the dollar figure, you can see that I think that bottom line is 7.7 million. That's roughly what we bring in property taxes. So the logic is if we if our budget is tied up from year to year in the amount of property taxes we bring in, that's a healthy place to be. You know, it means we're running healthy there. We're not over on the projects, but I stress that because the yellow projects, these ones that they want every year, it may have to change from let's give something to every school to know which ones are our priorities. And part of the biggest increase in there I want you to look at, because you can look at the individual lines and see how they've increased, but you'll probably notice that it's technology, and I may ask why. But that is, if we are truly going to stick to a 1-to-1 device ratio, we need to start rotating these devices out. And in order to do that, you can see that's going to be your large increase. That's why the bottom line happens to be similar to last year, but technology is higher. And that's because I do that because I felt like you as a school board have made that a priority. And so we need to, that goes back to when we're designing a budget, that's why we need to have the priority. Is the priority any of the projects we've talked about here? And maybe it's the boiler is the priority, or maybe it's the turf field, or the bus garage. I'm just saying we have to prioritize which ones they are and come out. Now, the financing side comes in as in the past where we got in trouble is when I'm speaking of MBA bonds, where we got in trouble was the amount of money that the state sends us. What I haven't included in this is the state money, which we got over $7 million last year. And the reason we've been doing that is because we're in a growing district, and I fully expect that we'll get some state money. And I view that as that's the perfect money to be building some of the one-time projects out of that we're talking about. So I think from a budgeting perspective, we'll be all right next year. I would only bring up MBA if you're talking about spreading it rather than how do we eat that all at once. I'll bring that up at a later date, but I'm not going to do that today. I'm not here to sell you.
There's just Lark. Sorry, there's a lot of board members who don't know what the MBA bond is. Could you just give them a quick primer so that because it sounds really good on the surface, but maybe you could just speak to that so that everybody's on the same page.
High interest loan, but it's a lot higher than a general obligation bond.
And so he said, but the bottom line is when we issued bonds last year, general obligation, they had to be voted on. These ones do not, as was pointed out. But how that was organized years ago is we created a municipal building authority, which is what MBA stands for. And actually, you as a school board are all members of that MBA. So the example is you created one, and the way you get around not having to issue bonds to build it is because they have bonding authority. You can issue bonds. They're not backed by the state guarantee, which is why the higher rates that superintendent was referring to. I don't know what it was a little, it was a slip. We'll just,
Heaven just is shaking now.
something there. Anyway, the MBA bonds, what happened years ago, and I'll just use this example, we built a building with it, CLC, with MBA bonds in Copper Canyon. Okay, we had it, and actually we've had a few. As a matter of fact, we're still paying on one. We still have one, which is Grantsville Elementary, because of some financing from the federal government that we have a good rate on. So there is a reason and a need for MBA, but where we got in trouble years ago, in our opinion, and we talked about this years ago, was it spreads payments over 15 years. So if you have a big project, you know, it's like a bond. It can be over multiple years, which is good. But where we ran in trouble is it was based on revenues from the state that I'm referring to that dried up. And when it dried up, the only at that point, you only have one option, and that is to increase taxes, or you're eventually going to run out of money. And so that's why at the time the board decided to refinance it with general obligation bonds, because those can actually float up or down because they've been voted upon, whereas an MBA isn't. So you have to make sure you budget for it and plan for it accordingly. And that's why I say you only use it if you can be smart on how we budget for that. I'd be cautious of putting too much into this state money that can dry up very quickly, and that's what we learned a few years ago.
And all joking aside, I won't put words in Julia's mouth, but it was woefully unpopular, is probably an understatement. Julia, you're nodding without me putting words in your mouth. I would run as fast as, if we can't live within our means and we have to do that, then we probably need to reconsider what those priorities are. And that's Scott speaking only, but Julie, I don't know how you feel, but I was traumatized.
I mean, like, we'd had that money coming in, we'd never had that situation, and it seemed like a no-brainer because we needed the CLC and it worked out, but yeah, it can dry up at any minute. And so, I mean, the economic situation can change so quickly that, yeah.
It's not the best option by any means. We don't suggest that. It is just one of your tools that, or that you have to financing, but it's not our go-to.
And Laura, can you say what it stands for?
Municipal Building Authority.
Okay.
And so you as a board sit on that. So whenever you need to take action on it, you might have to do this in a future meeting. You'll have to. It's kind of like the canvassing. You have to meet as an MBA, Municipal Building Authority, and vote upon things there, and then go back in regular meeting. But how they build it or finance it is they look at it as if the MBA owns a building, which happens to be you as board members are on that, but it's a separate legal entity from the school district. And so therefore, the way they get the financing is that in the CLC case, it's as if the district is leasing the building from the MBA. Now, it sounds funny because we are a related entity, but that's how they do it. You show it as if it's a lease from one to the other. But at the end of the term, it basically becomes district property. But that's how the legal term, the legal way around the MBA. Now, what I will say, if Zions were here, what they would say, the reason the MBA bonds can be popular is because sometimes there are things that you will not be able to pass in a general election. And I say that because I use the example they like to use is a district office or a bus garage or something that people will look at, well, I'm not going to vote for that because it's sometimes not in their community. Those are instances where they recommend if there is an actual need there, don't have the financing now, then you can talk about a plan to do it. So there are unique times you want to look at it, but going back to what was said earlier, I think our go-to is we like general obligation bonds whenever we can because they're voter-backed. There are definite reasons to do that way.
I just want to ask a clarifying question. Earlier you said 7.7 million comes in from property taxes, and it looks like you guys are asking for just under 7 million. So, and that's with those projects on hold. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah, that's without those projects right there. So as you go down that list, you can see last year's budget, and you can kind of go through there and see where costs have changed. Some of the big ones that changed is like district-wide fencing went from 15,000 to 70. That's to take on a lot of the consideration from the safety and security assessment, adding a lot of projects in regard to that. Lark mentioned the technology, that one's increased quite a bit. From all the budgets that I oversee, as you go down there, the only ones that increased was the turf and landscape maintenance and the fencing. Those are the ones I oversee. Those are the only ones that increased, and then you can see some of the other ones decrease. So we actually save money through kind of the general operations. And the reason the landscape maintenance went up, that's actually for safety and security as well. Doing some stuff to help our current football fields, and as well, we have a lot of raised sidewalks and lots of slip, trip, and fall hazards throughout our campuses, and that's to go in there and try to accommodate some of those things and make our campuses safer as well.
Thank you.
The cost of this stuff that's yellowed, and we've tried to, you can tell, because we had the district-wide projects come in at 6.9, most of that's attributed to technology. We tried to, maybe we can do that without buying as many buses as we have in the past, and try to, so that it's not such a huge number, so that we can stay within the money we think we're getting from the state. But that number doesn't include the 2 projects that we have on hold, nor does it, the third one, IBAPA, which is not on hold.
So it doesn't include the IBAPA. So does that mean we're over budget?
No, because I heard Lark say we're getting about 7 million from the state on top of that.
Oh,
Need to add IBAPA in. The boilers are not in there, replacements that
Yeah,
I
they are.
saw.
Yeah, they are. So the Stansbury High School and Grantsville High
In
School.
the yellow?
They are.
Okay, I thought they would be
I
higher
see
than
'em.
that. Okay. But yeah, then it won't include the bus garage and IBAPA, which I had out on the side. If we went with the numbers we had the other day, would be upwards of 19 million. For all of them. I'm not saying that'll happen in 1 year. That's the
Well, I was
full
going to say,
project, but-
IBAPA would probably be paid for over a 2-year period. The financial, it's over 2 financial years.
And I do that because full transparency, the other thing I want to say is we had $40 million in capital in reserves at the end of last year's recall and capital outlay. And part of the reason, when we talked about the bonding, that we need to make sure we had some in reserves in case they end up coming in higher than our projections for bonding.
But when we voted to build IBAPA, the intent was to use part of those reserves for that. I mean, that was always, it wasn't part of an annual capital conversation. That IBAPA was, and appreciating that and the other reserves, but I think the intent, and we already voted on it, to build IBAPA. So I'm not sure that that's really, pertinent to this conversation. We've already approved it.
We're coming back to explain that because we got 2 new board members that weren't there as part of that.
The projects I didn't have on the road I want to get to in the 19 million was both the warehouses we've bought. That would be the full build out. I had added in there. That'd be the Stansbury High Edition and everything. So I wanted to show you that because if you carve out 20 million from that and IBAPA, those 3 projects, from that 40 million, that's half of it, and that would only leave 20 reserves for the building of new buildings, and then you could be completely depleted. So I'll always caution that we don't get to the point where we spend too much. But be aware that those projects out there aren't in that number there.
when do we find out what money, I know Camille asked at the beginning, what money we're going to get from the state? Does that come in June? Or when do they tell us?
We usually know by the end of March or early April.
Oh, April, okay.
After the session,
Oh,
they do
and
a post-legislative tour, and they go over what our budgets, and that flows through worksheets up. If you see items on here that you're really concerned about that we didn't yellow and say we're moving it over here, if you see items that had no color, it means we're basically postponing them for the next year. But if you saw one that you thought needed to be moved over, that's fine. It just drives that 800,000 up. Does that make sense? Because all those above the line are the district-wide budgets. That yellow is the capital outlay that we're recommending based on requests from principals. So, and that number can go up or down.
I just have one quick comment or question, Ian. You know, it's been a month ago or like somewhere like that we got that book for our leisure reading of all the security and things.
Yes, have you got
And I
through all of
assume,
that?
and I assume because of the orange, those are things that were in that book that's starting to be addressed, right?
Correct.
Okay.
And so that would fall under that district-wide safety and
Mhm.
security.
Okay.
That's that $346,500 to start moving and picking off some of those items off of that, making our campuses safer. And like I said, you go up into the fencing, and that's part of that safety as well, and so is the turf and landscape maintenance. Some of those areas there that we felt that they fell under those budgets a lot better than safety and security.
Thank you.
Okay. Is there any other questions or comments about capital outlay or projects? Okay, thank you so much. That was helpful and awesome, and it's good to be able to, we talk a lot about transparency, and as Bob was saying, I just, got off an election with taxpayers saying we need this and this and this, and during my election, it was the same thing, and I felt so confident and comfortable after coming to one of these meetings and seeing everything laid out, and I think it, goes to the district office for how well you guys run things, and so appreciative.
Yeah, just
So-
to add to that, so we were very excited to start working on all these projects. We're going to start picking up on the design for the high school here in the next few weeks, and so we'll kind of revisit that like we did in previous when we brought different groups to kind of look over that and make sure we have everything how we want it, and make sure we get what we need in those schools. It does say operations report on there, so just do that. I just wanted to let you guys know how awesome all the directors and supervisors are in the operations department. They work around the clock to make sure our kids are safe. We did have a change at the transportation department, so now we have new administration there. They're doing awesome. We've actually hired an individual potentially coming from Alpine to come in to increase the view of the transportation department and make that a success as well. Just a lot of good things happening in the operations. And then it goes down from that top leadership to the real people that really count, and that's our people on the ground level. So our custodians, our maintenance guys, our cooks, our bus drivers, they're amazing. They love our kids. It's pretty cool to get out there and see what they do every day. And so I just wanted to make sure you guys knew how much I appreciate them and how much they do for our kids every day. And so they're amazing. So I just wanted to kind of share that with you.
Thank you. I know we feel the same way about those people, especially those of us with kids and grandkids that are personally affected. I think everyone has something with those people, so we appreciate them as well. Thank you so much for all you do. Whoa, okay. Moving on to board training. This is something I'm passionate about because I still feel new on the board. And I also think that even, if I've been on anything a long time, it's really important to go over things and be reminded of things. And so I had sent out an email just asking people to, we're giving this book, it's called Coming to Order. And it just talks about a guide to successful school board meetings. And I'm feeling really successful right now that we are an hour and 45 minutes in and we're already to board trainings. Anyways, I had just said everyone pick like 2 minutes to go over and just teach each other about something that they wanted, that stuck out to them in the book. And do you guys want me to set a timer, or do you think you really could go? You want the timer? Scott Bryan thinks we need a timer. He's probably meaning for me. Okay, Scott, Brian is the timer. Who wants? I'll go first. As you can see, I get a little flustered up here as I am going through the voting procedures. And I'm on page 33. And it says Exhibit D, some procedural guidelines. And I think I know what I'm saying, and then all of a sudden I look around and I'm like, Alan, help me out, or, and I know Bob down there is going, man, can she not get this motion right or the second right? But I'm just going to read this until the timer goes off. The following guidelines have proven helpful to school boards. A board should agree on and adopt an agenda format that will follow at regular meetings. Number 2, action items on the agenda require a motion by a board member, a second to the motion, a discussion, and a vote. Number 3, other than the consent agenda, each motion should be limited to one idea or issue. Number 4, no new motion may be made while another is being discussed. Number 5, a motion may be amended and votes on the amendments must be taken before acting on the original motion. Number 6, before a vote on the main motion is taken, business can be interrupted by a motion. 2, and then it says to table the motion, to postpone the action, to refer the motion to a committee, to withdraw it from consideration, or to adjourn the meeting. So anyways, I'm going to stop there because I want to be reminded of that all the time, and I'm grateful you guys are being patient with me and hope that you'll continue, and maybe I can get through a board meeting and get it right. So anyways, anyone else who wants to go next? Thanks, Bob. What page?
Well, I was looking, I'm a big guy on parliamentary procedure. Like I said, it's one of those things that I've lived with and taught for 37 years. But I think the big thing, and I don't know what page. I thought I had it all marked, but it's, let's.
Sit behind the owl, right?
Yeah. The owl, yeah. So anyway, the one thing is, the parliamentary procedure runs just with some basic principles. It's one thing at a time. Rule of the majority, rights of the minority, and courtesy to everyone. So everybody has an opinion. So that was the one thing. But then, because of my history with being an association leader, I know the grievance program and things like that for employees where they can, put in a concern. And again, Melissa, I can't find the page that I thought I had marked.
Oh, that's okay.
But in here it talks about a grievance procedure where employees can talk instead of just reaching out to the board members, which I still think a lot of people still reach out to board members, but employees, we could always say, well, there is this grievance, there is a way of stating your concern. It talks about in the book of having a grievance or a policy where community people can fill out some type of, under policy, fill that out and have their concerns addressed. Because, since being elected, even before being sworn in, I'll bet you I get 2 or 3 emails a week or more, and I feel obligated to at least ask the question and then maybe respond and say, here are some people you could talk to. For instance, today about how does how does a school like Northlake, because of being a Title I school, how do they pay for field trips when they have a pretty non-functional PTA? And so I says, well, maybe you reach out to TEF or you reach out to some your directors or principals and ask, is there some other funding that you could do educational field trips? So anyway.
Okay.
Good.
Thank you.
I'll go next because it actually kind of goes off of what Bob was just talking about as well. So on page 16.
Your time's up already.
I know, my time's already up. On page 16, 17, and I've kind of actually talked to Scott Bryan and some other people about this. It talks about establishing board procedures. So I actually went under our own board policy, and we do have board procedures listed under policy 1006. The board policy is very limited. It's just very short and kind of talks about, of course, how the agenda is prepared, what makes a quorum, motions, and then also the public participation as well. But I would like to, and I kind of wanted to get your feelings on it, because if you look in the book, it talks in more depth of that. It goes into some details about, for like what Bob brought up, if there are public concerns. Also for new board members, if there's questions, how do I handle this situation? What do I do as a board member in this area? Even adopting a policy on electronic meetings, which we already have done in the past, which I was grateful before COVID. What else is on here? But it is something that I think it is a good idea that we periodically review as a board, and we discuss how we want our procedures and what we want written down in a policy manual. It also talks about, of course, having that policy manual on the website. So if a teacher has a concern, or anyone else of how to reach a board member, what concerns do I bring to a board member? And that can all be listed in the manual. So I just wanted to get your guys' input, what you think about having a handbook for board members. I don't mind putting together something. We just have to all be on the same page and agree that we're gonna follow it. Because other districts have one, but they don't follow it. So, that's my spiel.
Awesome. So can we save that feedback for later? Can we keep the board training going? Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Did you want to hold off for a little while?
I just like listening.
Okay, perfect.
I'll go,
Okay.
because Alan, this is for Alan. On page 4, it talks about the meeting time wasters, and you guys give me a bad time, but look, it's in the book. But I won't read all 10, you're all capable of that, but I identified the opportunities. I thought, number 4, doing over what was done wrong the first time. Board should feel free to admit mistakes and make corrections, but most errors occur when board makes decisions that should have been delegated to experts on the staff. You know what? Let the district do the district job. At the end of the day, we have just a few roles. We hire the superintendent, we hire the business administrator, we set policy. And so oftentimes when our meetings tend to bog is when we get into the minutia of things that we really don't, and we're not the experts. So that was one. Number 5, insisting on unanimity. There you go. Efforts to find common ground always don't succeed, and people disagree, vote, and move on. Accept the fact that sometimes you'll be on the losing side. I am the expert. I've lost more 6-1 votes than all of you combined. But that's okay. I'm good at 6-1, and I'm on the 1. But that's okay. And you know what? I don't have hard feelings over it. And you know what? But sometimes we don't need to debate to convince everybody. It is what it is, and we just move on. I like number 8, a failure to use policy. Oh, crud. A board has 2 options. When presented with a problem, call the superintendent's attention to the guidance provided in board policy, or attack the problem head on. Solving all the issues that come up in the schools will run the meeting until the wee hours of the morning and result in bad decisions. You know what? We already have policy. Let those govern it. And it's just an observation, and I have 7 seconds, so maybe I can get the other one. Number 7, failure to delegate, and I'm running the clock, so I can do this. And I'm taking Alan's time. Number 7, just failure to delegate. Decisions that should be delegated to staff end up on the board agenda often. And ask the question, who should be held accountable? We don't need to talk about everything. And that's my 2 bits, and I went over, sorry. I used 30 seconds of Alan.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Yeah, he
He turned it off.
Rude. I have never seen you give anybody leeway. I'm really, wow, that's awesome.
What is me?
He gave it to himself. I mean, I've seen
There's an
that
advantage
before.
to being timekeeper.
It's okay, at least, I was gonna say, you've gotta have some advantage to keeping the clock.
All right,
I'll give you that.
Yeah, I'll go next
'Kay.
because mine kind of piggybacks off of Scott's. And I agree with what Scott has said, but I think on our board especially sometimes, when we are discussing a decision, that sometimes we have, so I'm kind of on page 23, we have scenarios already aligned for us, and we throw out a new one. And, it says like sometimes you might need to table it to get more data or to figure it out before you actually vote on it, because, I know give it to the administration also, but when it's our decision, I think if it needs more data, then we should do that in place of, in that same meeting, decide, oh, we don't have any data on this new one, but it sounds okay, and vote on it, and then we don't know some of the unintended consequences of it, and kind of on that same thing is always keeping an open mind and, compromising. The board has to compromise, because I've been on the losing side a lot too on some of those decisions, and what happens, but as long as we can compromise and have that open mind, and when we need to ask for more data.
You got 38 seconds. Can I go? I've got another.
Oh,
one.
no. Valerie, you're up. My job is to keep the meeting going, right? Okay, Valerie, you're up.
Scott, put your timer right here.
You've already
Thank you.
wasted 3 seconds.
Don't worry. Okay, so I was actually looking under welcoming the public and the public participation at board meetings. This was something new to me. I did not know this, but page 45, in the paragraph, it says, all members of the board should be fully attentive when a citizen is addressing the board and should feel free to ask questions for clarification. Moreover, if the president or superintendent can resolve a citizen's question or concern immediately, they should do so. I didn't know that. I didn't know we could ask, when somebody's standing there talking, I didn't know we could ask questions to clarify.
We can't. So that's just talking about welcoming visitors. So before the board meeting, when they're walking in, you can talk to them. But when they're actually speaking in public comment, we can't.
So then what is this
respond back
talking
to-
about?
Just when, like before meetings, when you're welcoming them in
But
to
it's
the
saying-
building.
it's
It
saying
says-
when they are a citizen addressing the board, that would be, but I mean, that hasn't been our policy, but we are totally not doing it the way this book says.
So that would be why I thought, I didn't know you could do that, because this board doesn't, right?
Right, because that's how it's been since I've been on the board. Are we,
But-
Scott
Oh,
or
I think we
Juliet?
can.
Do you want to?
The key though is that you can't take action on
Right,
anything
you
that
can't take
occurs.
action, but you
And you can't have a discussion about personnel. And the other observation generally, I think the reason it evolved to where it is the reality is you don't know what they're, it's not like you come prepared. So typically, the sense has been, well, let them talk, and then if you need some more clarification, or we've instructed the superintendent. to
Which you didn't
have
let
that
me finish,
conversation.
because it
Hold on.
does
I'll
say
start again.
in the next paragraph, sometimes, however, issues raised by citizens at board meetings call for follow-up and response at a later time, which totally makes sense to me. While it is important to reassure those addressing the board that their concerns are heard, a board should use caution. Taking action before studying and discussing matters raised in public comment is not recommended. So I think in general, like you were saying, you're not going to make a decision or say, oh yes, or oh no, or whatever. But I did find it interesting that paragraph before. I did not know that.
We could amend our thing if we did have just a question of clarification about what they're saying, because they get after their 3 minutes, hey, are you specifically saying this, or are you meaning this? Like if we could do something like that.
But the other part is we're not even, somewhere in here, we don't even have to have that. The only time you have to have public comment is during a tax hearing and there's a couple times, truth and taxation and budget are the two.
But I think it's nice to have.
No, and I'm not
that,
saying we don't, but I'm just saying,
just
you don't even
so
have
our
to have
patrons
that.
feel like they have some way to let us know if there really is an issue.
Well, and sometimes if they're bringing something up, if we as board members have a question or need to clarify something, I always thought that you couldn't say anything.
Me too.
So to me, that was news. And I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah, I like that. I mean, so what do you mean? Do we need to amend something to be able
Well,
to ask them?
I don't even
It's
know
not
how
written
we
in
evolved.
Yeah, it's
to
not
that,
in
but
policy,
yeah,
but I
we
think-
could just let everybody know. that
Yeah,
that was-
like if there's a question. So, okay, board training is complete. Everyone got to go that could and wanted to. We appreciate that. I am going to excuse myself. I've got somewhere I've got to go. We can do one of two things. I can hand it over to Camille, We've talked about there's 3 things left on the agenda. We have gotten some great discussion, so we could end the work session, or we could dive in. The other, I don't know. How do I go from here? I'm so sorry.
Just I mean, if you need to leave, and it looks like you wanted to talk about 1.5, I would suggest we just move that one forward to another work meeting. And the other one's not that but the other ones feel like it's just a board discussion kind of thing.
Yeah.
And maybe we could just move 1.5 to another future meeting.
Well,
The
I
others
think
we
Camille
can
could
still-
talk about that one too. I think we were just, right? The board agenda discussion?
Pulling that one,
Oh,
but I
we-
could be wrong.
You're right.
Just let it go for this time.
Okay.
Yeah. So you're saying you want to, I just want to make sure I understand you, Scott. 1.6 and 1.7 for next time, or you
No,
want to just have
think
discussions?
I think we should talk about 1.6, and especially my sense
we'll
is that
excuse Melissa.
my sense is that there's some concerns and so for some planning around parent-teacher conferences, and that I don't know that you want to put that off for another month necessarily. That's just my read,
Okay.
but
gonna
I don't
throw
know
it
if I'm
over to
reading
Camille.
right.
Thank you.
Let me just address that. We haven't, we're not on a timeline on parent-teacher conferences. It's just one of the things that we agreed with the Teachers Association based on feedback from previous stakeholder surveys that we would include. And so we're not at a timeline crunch on parent-teacher conferences because we're not going to change them for this year. We just need to decide how we want to do if we change parent-teacher conferences for next year. And quite simply, very shortly to explain that, as we do our monthly liaison meetings, when Del and I meet with TEA leadership and they represent teachers, they say, we've had some feedback from parents and from teachers that